Hello friends, this is Truth Games, a project where we dissect the world's most complex conflicts and disinformation that surrounds it. Today we are talking about Syria, a war that has been raging for 14 years right now and seems endless. The country is back in the spotlight due to a large-scale rebel offensive against Bashar al-Assad's regime. Who is who in this tangled war? How do the battles affect the region and global politics? And could this be the beginning of the end for Assad and his regime? Let's try to figure it out. Stay tuned to our episodes and stay informed about what's happening in the world. Subscribe to UATV and share this video. In Syria, a massive offensive by rebel groups led by Hay'at Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, is underway. The attack is taking place on two fronts at the same time, west of Aleppo and around the city of Sarakib. Both directions are strategically important for Assad and his regime, making it impossible to ignore these attacks. But this is just the beginning. HTS leadership claims that the main strike is still ahead.
The key element here is the Assad regime. He is the son of the elder Assad, so this is a whole dynasty. It's important to understand that this dynasty is Alawite, which is a confessional minority in Syria. In Syria, the main population consists of Sunni Muslims. Alawites, there are literally around 1 to 2%, something like that. Well, not many, to put it simply. Less than 5%. And essentially, the clans consisting of this minority. In the Middle East, religious denomination is generally more significant than national identity, meaning the region is mainly divided along religious lines. Therefore, the Assad regime is the trigger, meaning if we look at any forces there, from radical ISIS terrorists to the moderate Syrian opposition, they all share one thing in common. They are all against the Assad regime. In other words, the Assad regime is, simply put, the trigger for what the war is about. They want to overthrow it. Of course, each of these forces has its own vision. Erdogan and Assad couldn't reach an agreement, and now they are surprised by the scale of the successes, how everything has crumbled. So it is likely the offensive could have and should have been a pressure factor on Assad. In the end, everything just collapsed, and they managed to enter the city. Now the plans will change, as they say, following the script. Although Plan A is still in place, initially there was an idea to conduct a large, serious offensive operation. Well, it's clear that Erdogan's actions are not random. Everything was prepared for this. It's obvious that this is happening with Turkey's sanction. Broadly speaking, let me remind you, Turkey is part of NATO. And not just NATO, it has the second strongest army in the alliance. Turkey represents a vacuum in strategic relations with the United States. So there's no need to think that all of this is happening with mere whimsical vacuums.
HTS has already captured a significant portion of territory west of Aleppo using modern FPV drones. Can you already see the hand of Budanov here? They also claim to have eliminated Iranian advisors and senior officials in the Syrian Arab army. The rebels have seized numerous spoils, including ammunition and FPV drones that Assad's army didn't even have time to use. The Syrian war is a tangled web of dozens of players. Here are just the main forces. Red, Assad's regime supported by Russia, Iran and previously Hezbollah. Black, ISIS, or the Islamic State, which remains in the desert but regularly attacks Assad's army. Yellow, the Kurds, backed by the US, they control Syria's oil fields, through there are complexities here too. Green, Syrian rebels, these are various groups, the largest of which are HTS and the Syrian National Army, SNA, supported by Turkey mainly. However, under the umbrella of each of these groups, there are dozens of smaller factions. For example, even among US-backed rebels, there are Arab groups calling themselves the Free Syrian Army. Meanwhile, in Kurdish-controlled cities like Raqqa, Assad regime agents have long been active. Why is this offensive important not only for the region itself, but also for global politics? Syria has long been a battleground for global and regional powers, like Iran, that uses Syria to strengthen its influence in the Middle East, Russia, who supports Assad to mainly maintain a military base in the Mediterranean and project power on the global stage. Turkey backs the rebels and seeks to increase its influence in northern Syria, and the US provides support to the Kurds and aims to retain control over the oil fields. Meanwhile, this offensive could significantly shift the balance of power in the region. If Assad's regime starts losing territory, it will deal a serious blow to both Russian and Iranian positions.
Therefore, when Assad's regime was truly threatened with collapse in 2015, Russia directly sent in its contingent. That means the war in Syria had started even before 2015. They provided him with weapons. They supplied him with tanks, well, not airplanes, but tanks and other weapons and so on. Some Russian specialists were likely involved. But until 2015, there wasn't a direct contingent with aviation, Russian redeployment, and so on. When it became clear that Assad was not managing, his regime was truly on the verge of collapse. Yes, and the Russians managed to stabilize the situation, but now we see that Russia is fully embroiled in the war in Ukraine, fully at a large scale, and it lacks the resources for the war in Ukraine. And therefore, where would they find additional resources for Syria?
4 years of relative calm in Syria allowed the rebels to stockpile resources. Those who were children at the start of the war 14 years ago are now new recruits for the rebel army. And the hatred towards Assad's regime, Russians and Iranians has only grown over there. This offensive might mark a new chapter in the war, but will it be the end of the Assad regime? It all depends on whether international players can come to an agreement or if the conflict escalates itself even further. The Syrian war has already lasted 14 years and has claimed over 500,000 lives. It serves as a reminder of how brutal power struggles and competition for influence can destroy an entire country. Meanwhile, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been ongoing for 11 years now, with the full-scale war soon entering its third year. It is crucial to understand who is truly provoking and carrying out acts of aggression while hiding behind the mask of being the most peaceful country in the world. So stay tuned to our episodes to stay informed about what's happening in the world. Subscribe to UATV English and share this video. See you next time, and don't let propaganda win.